Welcome back. We've been going over spiritual monism. So far, we've talked about reincarnation, the appeals, and the rejections. We also talked about two forms of spiritual monism. And now we want to talk about Advaita Vedanta, the first form of spiritual monism that I introduced you to last video. So if you're on the handout following along, we're on number 7 now. So let's read that together. The central teaching of Advaita Vedanta is that Atman is Brahman. Remember, that means the self is ultimate reality. The nature of Atman Brahman is pure existence, pure consciousness, pure bliss. That is also stated in Hindu scriptures as Sat Chit Ananda. That is what the real self is, or Tat Dvam Asi. Thou art that. I should tell you a story. There's one mind only, and its ideas, the world, what we're experiencing, is an illusion or is avidya, due to ignorance. So Maya is illusion, avidya is due to ignorance. So let me tell you a story. In Hinduism, there are 3 castes that get religious teaching. They go to Brahmin school. And there's a story about a father who sends his son to Brahmin school. And the kid comes home after probably the equivalent of a master's degree. And the father asks him, "Did you learn about ultimate reality at Brahmin school?" And the son seems confused. He's like, "No, we didn't learn about that." And so the father decides, well, I'm going to have to teach you myself. So he wants to teach the son about the nature of his self. And he tells him, go into the backyard and get a fig from our fig tree. So the son brings the father a fig, and the father says, cut that fig open and look inside. So the son cuts it open, and the father says, what do you see inside there? And the son says, I see tiny seeds in there. And the father says, take one of the seeds and cut it open. So the son cuts the seed open and brings it to his father, and the father says, what do you see inside there? And he says, I don't see anything. And the father says, what is inside that seed? What you can't see is its subtle essence. And the subtle essence of that seed becomes the entire fig tree. And then the son's like, okay. And the father says, you are that. Thou art that. And the son's a little bit confused about this, like, what? And the father sees his son's confusion, and so he wants to teach him the same lesson in a different way. So the father says, go into the house and get some salt and a glass of water and bring it to me. So the son does this, and the father tells him, put some of the salt inside the water, stir it up, and let's check back tomorrow. So they check back tomorrow, and the father says, take a sip of that water. And the son takes a sip, and the father says, what do you taste? And the son says, I taste salt. And the father says, the salt that you put in the water permeates the entire water. You don't see it, but the salt is the essence of the salt water. You are that. So the son, still at the end of the story, seems a little bit confused. Thou art that. But the teaching is that the self, the true nature of what we are, is all of that. All of it. You are that. You are the one. And the one is everything. So this is a hard teaching, and so sometimes we have to get to it through an analogy. And so number 8 gives us an analogy of a dream. All right, so imagine you are sleeping in bed and you're having a dream that you're in class. How do you know the difference between real class and the dream class? So we're going to have to explore that. They're going to say that spiritual monism, or this view of ultimate reality, is like a dream, which is an illusion, because a shared illusion, as in a dream, is not a guarantee of objective reality. So when you dream, you have other people in your dreams, and just because there are other people doesn't mean that it's real. So maybe they're also part of the dream. So I'm here, my dog's here, my husband's over in the other house, but we could all be part of the same dream, right? So a shared illusion doesn't guarantee objective reality. And in a dream, just because we think we're real doesn't mean we are real. So in my dream, maybe it's a very vivid dream. I think I'm real. I think I'm teaching right now, but I'm not really. I'm sleeping. My body's in bed. The third point is, as in a dream, there is one self behind the many apparently real selves. So when I'm sleeping, I'm dreaming other people, other events. I'm the self behind these other selves. So reality is like that. And then 4, as in a dream, the only way in which the illusory nature of the individual self in the world can be realized is through mystical experience of self-realization, samadhi, enlightenment or awakening. So probably you are aware you're not dreaming right now because you had the experience of waking up. So when you're sleeping, you may be dreaming other people. Those other people aren't real, and you are the mind behind the dream. And the only way to know you're not dreaming is by waking up. You have this experience. They're going to say that Advaita Vedanta reality is like that. There's one mind, Brahman, behind the many apparent minds. I am an apparent mind. You are an apparent mind. Another mind is dreaming us. And just because we take ourselves to be real doesn't mean we are real. And the only way for us to realize our true nature is to have an experience. And the experience is enlightenment or awakening. So remember, I drew the picture of the one mind and its ideas, and we're in the ideas. We have to wake up, realize that we are the one. You are that. You are Brahman. Atman is Brahman. The self is Brahman, not the individual we take ourselves to be, but the being that's dreaming us, thinking us. Okay, now that might be hard for you to get your head around, and you can kind of imagine this through the movie The Matrix. The Matrix is more of a virtual reality. We're all connected to a network that is being driven by machines. Pretend there are no machines, okay? We're just in this virtual reality. We wake up, we go to work, we do these things, we think it's real, but it's not. And the whole goal is to realize that it isn't real. Okay, so what are the objections to this view? Remember, Ramanuja did not like this view. He thought it was a mistake. He thought Shankara had assumptions that were wrong. Now, there's 2 ways to look at this. One is to critique the appeal to experience, that you have to have a special experience to know what ultimate reality is like. We've talked about this before. So look at number 9. The general objection to appeal to experience is fourfold. This applies to any appeal to experience as a source of knowledge. The first one is no experience is meaningful without interpretation. Remember, we talked about that. And all of our experiences have to be interpreted. This experience of pure consciousness has been interpreted in many ways by many different religions. And in India alone, there are monist interpretations of this experience, dualist interpretations, Buddhist interpretations, theist. So in any religion, you can find a mystical element, and a mystical element is where they have an appeal to experience as a source of knowledge. It's subjective, it's experiential, you'll know it when you have the experience. All right, now the third objection to experience is a valid interpretation is internally consistent. So if we even were going to say, okay, let's do a monist interpretation of this appeal to experience. Well, the problem is that the monist position itself has problems. So this interpretation, absolute non-dualism or Advaita Vedanta, is incoherent in many ways. So we're going to go deeper. It's not just the appeal to experience that is the problem with Advaita Vedanta. It's Advaita Vedanta itself. So we're going to look at number 10, and this is the critique developed by Ramanuja against Shankara's view. Now, I want to warn you, this could hurt your head, but once you get your head around the objection, it's really a beautiful objection, because Ramanuja really goes to the heart of Advaita Vedanta and questions the assumptions. And so I would give this the stamp of good thinking, Ramanuja. So let's see what he says. Consider the criticisms raised by the qualified non-dualist. Now, remember the picture that I drew. There's the one mind and the thought bubble, the ideas, and that's where the world is. That's where you are. That's where I am. So he's going to ask, what is the nature of the world? Okay, so first, where does the illusion reside? Okay, remember, the world is an illusion. Is the illusion in Brahman's mind? And if so, how is that possible? Because Brahman's pure consciousness. Can't be in Brahman's mind. Is the illusion in my mind up here in the world? No, it can't be because I'm part of the illusion. This whole thing is an illusion. So where is the illusion? It's not in my mind because I'm part of the illusion, and it's not in Brahman's mind because he's pure consciousness. He can't have an illusion. So isn't that cool? That's a cool critique, right? Where does the illusion reside? It can't be in Brahman, and it can't be in the individual self. Okay, second critique. How can Brahman, who is infinite pure consciousness, be concealed given its nature? So if he's infinitely conscious, how could he be mistaken about who he is? And I've heard it explained this way. Imagine playing hide and go seek. You say, okay, I'm going to count till 10. I'll say this. I'll count till 10. You go and hide, and then I'll come find you, right? That's how you play hide and go seek. But can you play hide and go seek with yourself? How would that go? Like, okay, self, go. I'm going to count to 10. Go hide. No, wait. Why are you still here? Why? Wait. Go hide. How can you play hide and go seek with yourself? So when Brahman is, I don't know, playing by hiding in this world of illusions and then meditating in the world to realize its true nature as Brahman, it's like playing hide and go seek with itself. And that seems a bit ridiculous if he's infinite in consciousness, right? Okay, the third point. How can the world, which is Maya or illusion, be neither positive, nor negative, nor both, nor neither? Now, this is a quote from Shankara. Shankara says the world is neither positive, nor negative, nor both, nor neither. And Ramanuja says, what does that mean? Remember, that's the question we ask first. So positive means the world is a thing. It exists as a being. And if the world is a being, then there's two beings. There's Brahman and the world, and they both exist, which is contrary to monism, which says there's one thing, because now we have two things. So the world can't be a being or a thing, because then there would be two things, which is dualism. But it can't be negative, which means it's a thought. So the world can't be a thought. Why? Because thoughts are about things or beings. You can't have a thought about nothing. So thoughts are about beings. Beings exist in some way. So if you have the world as a thought, then it's a thought about a thing. And then there's two things again. So it can't be positive, a thing, and it can't be negative, a thought, because thoughts are about things, and you end up in dualism again. So what is the world? Now, these questions that Ramanuja is raising are meant to show the incoherence of Shankara's position. The fourth question he asks is, how can the world be neither real nor unreal, nor both, nor neither? Again, this is a quote from Shankara. The world is neither real nor unreal, nor both, nor neither. But by real, he means eternal. So the world, remember, this is the illusion. Here's Brahman, here's the illusion. The world is neither real, eternal, nor unreal, non-existent. So remember, on the square of opposition, we had all and none on the top. Those are contraries. So the world is not all is eternal, and it's not none is eternal. Now, there is another option. Remember the other two bottoms, some is and some is not. But it seems as though Shankara's stuck in all or nothing kind of thinking, and he wants to say it's neither real, eternal, nor unreal, non-existent. So guess what he says at this point? Reason can't grasp it. The nature of ultimate reality is beyond reason, and you have to go beyond reason. Well, what does that mean, to go beyond reason? Can you understand anything apart from reason? That's why they make this mystical experience. You have to experience it. What is it to experience without interpretation? So you can see after Ramanuja's questions, Shankara's position remains very unclear. The assumptions don't make sense. So Shankara has an option. Maybe you can help him out. How would you help Shankara revise his view or change things so that his position is more coherent? Well, look at number 11. Since Shankara believes all is one and therefore all is eternal, things must be either real, eternal, or unreal, non-existent. They cannot be temporal given his assumption. Well, he can change his assumption. He can say, you know what? Maybe Brahman, the one, created the world. Oh yeah, maybe the world is temporal. He could go that way, but then he'd have to change his assumption that all is one. Instead, he gives up reason. He says that reason cannot grasp the nature of the world as neither real nor unreal. Reason can't grasp it. He's faced with giving up his presupposition that all is one or giving up reason. What would you do at this point? Give up all is one or give up reason? He chooses to give up reason. This is a quote from Shankara. Those caught in the meshes of intellect are like elephants stuck in deep mud. The more you think about the nature of the world, the more you get stuck in it, and the more of a problem it becomes. So stop thinking. He says the highest philosophy is silence. He says it isn't is, and it isn't, and it isn't both, and it isn't neither. Silence. Now, it would be good if a person who gives up reason also remained silent, because words don't mean anything at this point. Unfortunately, Shankara and his followers continue writing and trying to persuade people to be spiritual monists, so they don't really stay silent, which is a lack of integrity. It's an unlivable position to give up reason. So he should give up his assumption, right? All right, so the highest philosophy is silence. Now, Ramanuja does a good job of critiquing Shankara's position and showing the incoherence. But what about Ramanuja's position? Let's look at that position. Remember, all is one with parts. So we want to ask, what does that mean? What does it mean to be a part of the one? So let's look at number 12. In the second form of non-dualism, one with parts, Ramanuja's view, we are all part of the one, or God, Vishnu, remember. The three possible interpretations are this. All the parts are the same, and each part is finite. So 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 to the nth is going to remain finite. There's going to be a problem with that. Remember, the one has to be infinite. 2, all the parts are the same, and they're infinite. So each part is individual, and it's infinite. So I'm a part of the one and I'm infinite. Or 3, all parts are not the same. Some parts are infinite and some are finite. So if you remember how I drew that picture in the last video, I chopped up into little squares and I left a big square. So each little square is part of the one. Maybe there's just a bunch of little squares. Or maybe each little square is infinite. Or maybe the little squares over here are finite and the big square over here is infinite. So how do we want to divide up the one? Let's look at the objections. Number 13. Objections to qualified non-dualism. First, all the parts are the same and they're finite. So if all the parts are finite, then the whole cannot be infinite, because if you have a bunch of finite parts and you add them up, it's still finite. And the one is infinite in this view. Further, beings cannot be finite and growing. So you can't be a finite being in an infinite cycle. That's what I'm trying to say. Remember, we talked about that, no unique event. So you can't be finite, limited, growing in knowledge, and be eternal. Because if you had an infinite amount of time and you're a finite being, you would still have infinite knowledge because you've been around forever. So here's a little argument that your soul's not eternal. If your soul were eternal, you would have infinite knowledge because you've been around for an infinite amount of time. Guess what? You don't have infinite knowledge because I have the grade books and I've seen it. Just kidding. So the soul is not eternal. So the first one doesn't work. If all the parts are finite, then the whole can't be infinite. You can't be finite and be eternal, going through unique changes and be forever. Second possibility, maybe each part is infinite. Well, what does that mean? If all the parts are infinite, each would be complete in itself, because that's what infinite means. It's a complete being. But if each infinite part is also a part, then a part is incomplete. So infinite means it's complete, part means it's incomplete. So you have an incomplete, complete, a complete incomplete thing, which is a contradiction. So if all the parts are infinite, each would be complete in and of itself and therefore not have or need parts to make it whole. You wouldn't have an infinite being with parts. All right, so the second interpretation doesn't work. What about the third interpretation? Some parts are infinite and eternal, and some parts are finite and temporal. Logically, this makes more sense, but this would be creation rather than non-dualism, which is more like theism. And Ramanuja would have to change his assumption from all is one to maybe all is not one. There's more than one thing. Maybe there's an eternal thing and temporal things. So this brings us to the end of spiritual monism. What we did in this unit was we looked at basically the worldview. I talked about some of the points of contact, reincarnation, karma, yoga. We talked about the appeals of reincarnation and some of the objections to those appeals. We talked about two forms of spiritual monism. We talked about Advaita Vedanta and Dvaita Vedanta. And then specifically in this video, we looked at objections to Advaita Vedanta or Shankara's view, which started here in number 9 and was in number 10. The more serious one was from Ramanuja in number 10. And then we saw Shankara's response. And then we saw Ramanuja's view clarified, all is one with parts. And then we said, is it really clarified? Does it really make sense to say all is one and it's part of the, all is one with parts? We're all part of the God. So we looked at that and said, it looks more like one being is infinite and eternal and other beings are finite and temporal, but that's not all is one. That's theism. So at the end of this handout, we've come to the critique of spiritual monism. The next position we're going to look at is dualism. So I'm going to pause here, and next time I see you, we'll be talking about the next unit, dualism.